So it's in our family, in our blood. Uh, be honest with you, I kind of stumbled into it. I started out towards an engineering degree, and when I fresh out of high school, and I realized at one point that wasn't what I wanted to do. The friend of mine that we were in high school together and got out and went into a drafting classes together, and then he went off to the Air Force, and it wasn't as much fun without my friend there. So I kind of changed directions at that point and started working towards law enforcement, taking public safety classes and things such as that at North Metro Tech. I spent some time as computer classes when I was there, and enjoyed, even as a youth, working with computers and stuff. In the early ages, I'm in my 40s now, so computers were not as prevalent when I was coming up out of high school into college. But I never finished my college degree. I got out of high school with a GED, and after 4 years, it was a discussion with my parents, and they're like, "Yeah, you're bored. You don't need to be there. We need to find something else for you." So I always had that stigma of having to put on my resume, I have a GED with some college, nothing else higher in education, all through my law enforcement career starting out. So, you know, it was a personal goal of mine to complete my degree. My parents both had college degrees. My mother got her doctorate about 10 years ago in nursing. My dad had a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and both my brothers graduated high school, so I always had that little bit that I felt like I was missing. So it was a personal goal of mine to complete. I remember sitting at graduation next to this other student. He's like, I think he said 4 years and 2 schools later, and I finished my degree. And I said 22 years and 3 schools later, and I finished mine. And he gave me a fist bump, and it was one of those just moments where you look at it and you're like, this is an accomplishment. It's something that I've done. I've completed this. And I remember one of the professors from the OML class was talking to me and said, "You need to go to the master's program." I'm like, "Yeah, I think I'm done with school." But, luckily, we had a agreement with the sheriff's office and the university for the EXCL program that we were going to, and I was able to get into that. So I was able to do that. The agency helped sponsor it and helped the cost of it, so that made it a lot easier for me to do. But it was a lot of work. It was quite a bit. I remember halfway through it, one of my partners that I work with in our criminal investigation division, he had completed his master's degree, and I remember about halfway through it, I'm like, man, I said, I just don't have time for it. I said, I'm just burned out. I'm tired of writing papers. I'm tired of doing things. And he looked at me and he's like, "Yeah, you could drop out of it." He says, "You could take a break." He says, "But you won't get anything done during that time, and you'll be that much further behind of completing it." He says, "Your best bet is to stick with it and stay in it, do it." And I did, and I'm glad that I did. I was able to graduate my cohort that I was in there with, and I had that extra little bit of accomplishment that I didn't just stop at getting a bachelor's degree. I went and got my master's, and that, where that'll take me from here, I don't know. Our agency wrote a policy about 3 years ago that for higher ranks within our agency, you have to have a certain level of degree. So it sets me up for those promotions and those abilities to move further into our department. So it's a personal accomplishment. It's also a professional accomplishment to allow me to move forward and do more in my career, which I've been with the sheriff's office now for 25 years. I've worked in the jail starting out just like anyone else. I went out and did my field training, became a road officer for a little while. And at the time when I got into it, education was just starting to be a big thing in law enforcement, where a lot of leaders in law enforcement were looking towards their supervisors and their officers, and they wanted them to have an education. And I remember looking into it, and a lot of us were under the belief that we don't need a college degree to go out and write tickets and lock bad guys up. We need common sense. But that has changed over the years, and trying to express that to newer officers who feel the same way, because they're like, why do I need to go write these papers? Why do I need to research this? Why do I need to do this? And the only real answer I can give them is it opens your perspective on a lot of things. You read things you would not normally read because you're forced to. You have to look for these resources. You have to go out and dig into things. You learn how to properly analyze things and look at the data you have and truly make more educated decisions about what you're doing. And it not only helps you in your writing when you're writing reports, but it also helps you in understanding how other people have looked at the same situations, and you get those perspectives, you get those viewpoints from another side. It may not be one that you agree with, but you at least have looked at it, and now it's going to affect the way that you view things and the way that you deal with people and deal with situations. And that's what I've told them. I said, this is no longer, we've always called it a law enforcement profession, but most professions require a higher level of education. And honestly, I think when our officers start getting up into levels of leadership and supervision, they need to have some type of education to back up. I have a 19-year-old son who's very smart, very intelligent, and he's like, why don't you go to college? I said, you're smart. I said, you know what you want to do. He wants to invent stuff. He wants to make a better battery, or he wants to do something. And he's one of those just math heads. He's one of those that takes math for fun. Which doesn't, because I've never been great at math, so it always just floored me. But I had to explain to him, I said, look, I said, it's not so much about the degree, what you get, it's what you get out of the contacts you make, the people that you get to know, the resources you learn to look up. I said, you can't do development of things for free. You can't do it without funding. I said, you need to learn how to talk to people and how to go out and get that. If you want to be a researcher, you want to do something along those lines. I said, plus, nobody's going to take you seriously if you come to them and say, I got this great idea for this energy technology or something, and they're going to say, well, great, what's your background? You're going to say, well, I graduated high school. And they're going to say, well, what do you know that I can't go to this electrical engineer, or I can't go to this nuclear engineer, and they're going to tell me something that's backed up. I said, so you need those certifications, you need those bona fides in order to show who you are, so that people look at you on paper and don't immediately dismiss you because you don't have an education.
I tell my kids that it teaches them how to think.
Yes, and that's
if they don't, you don't have to learn and memorize everything in a classroom, but college will make you think and make you learn to use a system. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't say that all that was bad or good or either way. I'm just saying you have to learn to navigate. You have to learn, given a system, what is it that I can do with the system, and how do I think my way through managing this system. I have a 21-year-old who's pretty smart, but in some ways he can be lazy to me.
Well, and that's, I think that's our perspective. And with wisdom comes, a lot better backside of what you could have done differently. And as much as we tried to, as much as our parents tried to impart that wisdom on us growing up, there are certain lessons in life you have to learn the hard way. There are certain things you have to make mistakes of and learn that this wasn't a good idea. Maybe I should have done something differently. Maybe I should have listened to my mother. So there's, I look back all the time and think, God, if I just listened to her on this, I'd be in a lot better position. And even my own daughter, I got a 20-year-old daughter and a 19-year-old son, and she has been through some tough times here up to 22 years, and she says, I wish I'd listened to y'all. I wish I'd asked, look, life's about just choices and repercussions. You deal with it. There's no good or bad decision. I said, you make a decision, you live with it, and you move on. And we've had to have that conversation about that. And it's, it's like I tell you, you got a lot of wisdom in a very short amount of time. And it's something you can't buy. You can't go to school. You can't learn from somebody else. You just get it.
Can we go back and have him introduce himself and talk about what you were talking about before? Absolutely. I so rudely interrupted you and said, oh, this is good, stop. And I mean, I guess that's really where the beginning is anyway. So.
Yeah. Real simply, I'm Lieutenant William Ballard. I'm with the Cherokee Sheriff's Office. I've been employed with them for 25 years. I've worked as a deputy sheriff in the jail. I've worked out as a uniform officer in the road. I spent about 5 years working as an undercover agent in our narcotics unit. Then I've worked as a detective in our criminal investigations, working both persons and property crimes. I'm a certified crime scene tech for the county. I've been to National Forensic Academy up in Knoxville, Tennessee. And currently I serve as the lieutenant over our intel unit, which is comprised of several different parts within criminal investigations. And these parts of it, we handle general forensics, we handle computer forensics, our sex offender registry, our internet crimes against children, our crime analysts, and our gang unit are all handled underneath my unit. And we are solely a support unit for our criminal investigations and all of the sheriff's office and providing those services. Probably the biggest proactive part of our unit is our ICAC, our internet crimes against children, so where we have undercover officers working online, chatting with child predators. And and I can't think of anybody that would ever look at that and say, oh, that's a bad thing for officers to do. But these are people, and yes, they're on there playing a 14-year-old personification. It's not a true victim, but what we're doing is taking people off the street before they're able to make someone a victim. And that's the really fulfilling thing about those types of crimes, is that we get to get those people before they do something bad. Our computer forensics, that was developed about 15 years ago, our computer forensic lab, and we've got several pieces of equipment that allow us to go in and break into phones and computers, and our computer forensic analysts, our digital forensic investigators, they go to several trainings. They've been through several different certifications in order to get into different devices, and sometimes they come across a new device that they have to reach out to resources that they have and learn how to get into those. So it's a constantly evolving field that these guys are working in, that requires them to just reach the furthest stretches of their knowledge and their training in order to get to the end result of finding that evidence in these digital devices. And we all know that the world is digital. I mean, everybody stores everything on a cell phone, a computer, a laptop, a tablet. There's numerous ways of people to capture and store data that's potentially illegal or provides evidence towards a case that we're working on. And we have to stay on top of that technology. And so I've got some really talented guys that do great work in that area and stay on top of it. As I said before, I'm a certified crime scene technician, which was on top of all the other training that I've had to have over the 25 years. It was another 240 hours of additional training. And then I was fortunate enough to get to attend the National Forensic Academy up in Knoxville, which was a 10-week course solely based on forensics. We got to go to what is known as the Body Farm, which is a place up in Knoxville, off of Knoxville Hospital, where people donate their bodies for study in the anthropology department, and the anthropologists lay these bodies out in this 2-acre plot of land off of a parking lot at the Knoxville Hospital, and they study the decomposition of the human body and how long it takes for a body to decompose in different states. This was established by Dr. Bill Bass many years ago, who's a renowned anthropologist in the United States. He went to the hospital administrators and asked them I need a plot of land to put some bodies out on. Of course, you can imagine their response on that, but he explained to them why, and after that he had FBI and others coming to him asking, hey, we need to know what happens to a body when it's in a trunk for a period of time. We need to know what happens to a body that's hung from a gallows. And there's just so many different things out there, and we got to spend part of that 10 weeks was a week out there, and we got to exhume human remains, because they'll bury bodies and let them decompose and there'll be nothing but skeletons. And so we'll work with an anthropologist. We'll excavate those remains and put them all back out, and they'll take them in and they put them in storage there on the college campus for study for their anthropology department. So it works in twofold. It gives us some experience of doing something that we don't get to do every day, and get to see something, but it allows their anthropologists the ability to study these bones and these remains and see how they've been affected over time, and medical history and all these other ways that they look at things from the anthropologist's perspective. But that was that's probably some of the greater experiences I've had with the sheriff's office, again, to do that and getting into the forensics. And it's just one of those things that I was in the right place at the right time, I guess, when I went into criminal investigations, and they needed people to work crime scenes, and myself and another detective really took a holding to it. And there was a lot more to it than bodies. It was fingerprints, looking at bloodstain pattern, looking at gunshot reconstruction, being able to take all this stuff and put it into an objective report to show what the evidence shows. And that was the nice thing about forensics is it's even though we have an opinion about what happened based on the evidence, all we can do is report on this is what the scene shows. So it gives a good objective view to the investigation, which is separate from the detectives who are investigating and interviewing people, and they have to take what the people tell them, and they have to come up with this subjective belief of, well, I think they're lying or I don't think they're lying. Whereas we get to say, well, they said this was here, but the evidence doesn't show that. It was obviously over here. So it's a nice way to bring those facts in and say, these are absolute facts. We can tell you that this happened this way. There's no other way this could have happened. I don't care what they're saying. Their story's not complete. And that's the nice thing about that part. But my career it's just been a different sets of assignments to where I've gotten to do different things, working narcotics, working undercover.
So how did your degrees, I guess starting with your bachelor's?
Back up and tell us about the educational
Yeah,
pathway.
how did they lead you? What were they, and how did they lead you into all of this?
Right. My bachelor's degree was, and my master's, but most of my bachelor's degree was the one that I had a personal stake in. Growing up, two brothers, an older brother, and a younger brother. I did 4 years of high school and then went out with a GED. I never actually graduated with a diploma from high school, and that was always something that was a stigma to me. Not something that was people put on me, but more that I put on myself. My parents were both educated with a college degree. My mother has her doctorate in nursing. My father a bachelor's in criminal justice. Both my brothers graduated with a high school diploma. And I always had that I had to put on my resume that I had a GED and no other education. And I always, it was always one of those things that I guess hurt me personally. I didn't feel comfortable with that. I was like, I need to have something more. And it took me 22 years after I got out of high school to finish my bachelor's degree, but through the sheriff's office and the relationship with the Reinhardt University, they were able to help provide some funding through that to make the cost of it a little more effective for us. Especially, I think I started my bachelor's when I was at the beginning of my 40s. So I had a full family I was trying to support and take care of. So paying for a college degree was difficult. Spending the time going into college and taking that time away from the family to go to class and do those extra things on top of working a 40-hour work week, 43-hour work week. It was nice that they came up with a program that allowed us to meet once a week for a 4-hour class and do that for an 8-week period for classes and so it still allowed me time to focus on my studies. It allowed me time to focus on my work and allowed me to spend time with my family at the same time.
So which program did you?
The organizational management leadership.
So was that your?
That was my bachelor's. Mm-hmm. And the way that program was set up, it really worked out good for me. And I know other people had the same experience with it as well. That the timing of the one night a week of meeting throughout that 8-week period, and then in between those classes you would have assignments to work on, papers to write, things to read. But once I completed that, it was a nice sense of accomplishment because I was able to, one up my brothers and say, I got a college degree and you don't now. You may have a high school diploma, but I've got a college degree. My mom always tells me this story, and this is one of those hokey things. She said when she was younger, before she had any kids, her and her girlfriends went to a psychic. And so this psychic told her, says, you'll have 3 boys. And she says, you'll have 3 boys. She says, and your middle one will be the first one to graduate college. She never told me this until I got my college degree. And she said she thought that she was full because at the time she might have actually had my older brother and myself. My younger brother had been born. She hadn't been planning on a 3rd one. And so imagine the surprise when there's a 3rd boy comes along. And I can only imagine her thinking, well, this is a bunch of hokey BS because, my middle son, who's supposed to be my first college graduate, has got a GED. But I don't think she ever lost faith in that because she always kept pushing us to do that and to get that higher education when we could. And so, it's interesting that it all came to fruition in that way. So I just always, that story always tickles me because, she was told this back before